So, Sue, you and I have known each other for a bit. Women make up two-thirds of the PR industry. What's the problem?
Yeah, right. So yeah, well, I mean, look at this call. Women
Yes,
make up two-thirds of this call as well. And
right.
um, so I think you're specifically talking about, women in leadership positions and communication and so forth. Yeah. I think that we are underrepresented and have been for a long time. And for me, there's a couple of things at play here. I think one, it is the sector that we're in. Around the C-suite table, it isn't always given the level of importance as a strategic partner that it should have. So sometimes it's hard to even get that seat at the table. But secondly, I think that there's just a lack of opportunities for women to really showcase their abilities at the C-suite level. And this is historic, and it's not just in our sector, but, for example, leaders tend to hire people who look just like them. And that affects a lot of people, not just women, not just in this sector. So there's that. I think women also don't play the game as well as men do in the sense of, we're not the kind that'll grab a couple of beers after work or go golfing on a Friday afternoon. Not, and I'm generalizing here, I
Well, it's
realize.
because men have time. We have time to do it, right? Kinda.
Well, I think it's just seen more intrinsic to the work that men have to do. Is part of that is this relationship building, and women tend not to have those opportunities as much. I remember way back when, like I'm talking in the 1980s, I was invited to join a monthly breakfast group called the Old Girls Club because it was the opposite of the Old Boys Club. And it was women leaders who were trying to connecting and make those relationships and those connections happen. Because we know a lot of business happens on an informal basis, right? Lots of connections, lots of relationships happen. And so if you're playing the game, you move up the ladder. If you can't play the game, you're not invited to the game. You don't even know what the game is because nobody's let you in on that little secret. It's pretty hard to do.
And Sue, I was quite interested because when I saw some stats that two-thirds of the industry are women, and then it just falls off a cliff when it goes into senior levels. Do you think there's also an element of in your sort of early years in your career, women in PR, it's about sort of what you know, and later it's about who you know in terms of getting those sort of senior positions. And if we are in the evenings having a disproportionate share of caring responsibilities, looking after kids, elderly parents, and we're not out there networking on the golf course, making those relationships. Because I remember going to a lot of these sort of networking events and there are hardly any women, that sort of at the hour, 6 to 8 p.m. You go to a panel discussion, you have a drink, you have a chat. Who do you work for? Oh, there's a vacancy. Oh, I'd love to apply. I mean, that sort of serendipitous aspects of career progression just isn't open to women if they are rushing home for their sort of caring responsibilities.
Yeah, 100%. And, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it's really hard then as a woman to walk into a room like that and suddenly start chatting people up, right? Like it is a very different dynamic. And so I think the other thing at play here is that there aren't enough mentors, role models for women who can bring them in, right? Bring them into the club, bring them into the secret space, introduce them, make sure that they, have those networking opportunities that you speak of. So mentorship is huge. And I've been fortunate to have been a mentor for lots of people over the years. And I personally find it hugely rewarding just to, like I said, pass it along, pay it forward.
Do you think there are lots of women who help each other out? Because sometimes I hear of others who say, well, actually, my best bosses have been men. And some women can be critical of other women. Do you think that sometimes some women can have a bit of a scarcity mindset? There's only room for one or two women at the top. So let's get those sharp elbows out and make sure we're the ones who get to the top. What have you experienced over the years? And have you experienced any changes over the years?
Yeah, you know what? Definitely early on, it was very much that. I do think it is changing, though. I do think that people are recognizing that we need to make space for all manner of individuals at the executive table. Um, he, she, they. Um, a range of ethnicities and diverse backgrounds. I mean, those diverse perspectives are what really make the C-suite hum, in my view. And if it becomes an echo chamber of the same people saying the same things, you can quickly get behind. This is a global economy, as we are seeing play out, in spades right now, certainly in North America and in other parts of the world. And so having those diverse experiences, having those people bring a new perspective can really help with things like, customer development, sourcing suppliers. Well, I'll say that 3 times fast. All those kinds of things, those relationships that come maybe from a different place and can move your business along instead of being that echo chamber.
It does kind of feel like men get cut a lot of slack, at the leadership level. If a man is harsh, it's okay. He's a teddy bear on the inside. And if a man is soft spoken, oh no. He can get tough when he needs to be tough. Whereas women, like they're Hillary Clinton or they're Kamala Harris. It's like they just get cast in that light. Does it feel like that as a female leader? That's how it looks to a male.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that we also get judged a lot. We get judged for what we wear, how we speak, how loud are we, how assertive are we. If we're too flexible, we're too soft, you're not leadership material. If you're too harsh, you're not projecting the right, culture of the organization. Like we get judged a lot on a lot of levels.
Judged by who?
Men, but also
Yeah.
the women, I would
Yeah.
say. Truly. I think sometimes we can be harsh critics of our female compatriots. I would say, let's everybody just lighten up a little bit. Let's just lighten up.
Sue, what advice would you give to men for them to sort of step up and support women in the workplace? I'll give you an example. I was at an event yesterday, and I had a man talk over me, and I was the only woman on the panel, and I was the only one that was talked over me. And do you know, I didn't even notice because it happens all the time. And actually, there was a man on my panel who stood up for me and said, I noticed that, and it's completely unacceptable. And I looked at him and I thought, what a fantastic man. Now, what advice would you give to men out there who also, a lot of them would have sympathy because they have daughters, their mothers, their wives. What advice would you give them in order to support women? And have you ever been talked over? Because for me, it seems to be an occupational hazard.
Yes, absolutely. Talked over or just blatantly ignored. Were you trying to get the chair's attention and say, I have something to contribute here? Men are more likely, my experience, men are more likely to just sort of speak up and say what they need to say. And women will wait for permission or wait to be called upon. And then if that never happens, then I guess you just take your good ideas and you go back to your office. So advice to men, I think is, firstly, advice to anybody. God gives us 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them accordingly. I think just listen more, listen and be open to hearing perspectives. And then the other thing is, and again, this is not necessarily a gender thing, but if there are people around the table who haven't said anything, call on them. Because sometimes people are reluctant to voice their ideas, in front of a group or they don't know when the right time is to jump in. So call on them.
Has that happened to you in a meeting where you've raised an idea and it kind of got glossed over?
Oh yeah, lots of
Yeah?
times. Lots of times. Yeah, and it's really
Give me
it's
an
really
example. Give me an example of a time where
I
that's
will
happened.
give you an example. I will
Okay.
give you an example. So one time I was at a board table meeting, and I had an item on the agenda, and the chair of the meeting, when it came my turn, looked at the agenda item and just said, "Yeah, we're not doing that." And then that was it. There was no discussion, no opportunity to talk through the idea and so forth. I mean, yeah, it's
Wow.
happened. And I know so you look shocked, Doug. You've
But
not
it's
been
just
to
cast aside. I mean, it's 2025, right? We've been talking. I joined the workforce in the 80s and we were talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
That's a half a century ago.
Okay, so to be fair, that happened in the 90s. So maybe we hadn't progressed as far. It
I
hasn't
bet it
happened as
still
much.
happens today, just like
Still
talking
happens
over a
today.
female leader, right?
It still happens today. It happens a lot of times, I find, when you're presenting your ideas to a group and they'll get dismissed, or they'll say, well, what does everybody else think? Which normally you would say, yeah, sure, I'm open to input, except that oftentimes your idea, your position, based on years of experience, having seen this a time or two, gets talked over, and suddenly we're going in a different direction. They don't circle back and say, how do you feel about that? Like, is that still going to work for us? Right? It's just, yeah, let's go with Bob's idea. Oh, okay, cool.
Do you think there's a confidence gap, Sue? Because you often hear about recruiters who often say that men would apply for roles if they've got, I don't know, 60% of the requirements. Women would sort of really need about sort of 95% before they feel able to submit their CVs. What would you say about, is there a confidence gap that exists? If so, what advice would you give to women and men to try and close that confidence gap?
Yeah, for sure. I have heard that. I've actually seen that, where you get some pretty bold applications from folks who aren't even remotely qualified, and yet you have to beg someone who is supremely qualified to even consider it. I think a couple of things. First of all, consider your whole life experience. So, someone who manages, the house, maybe you're a single mom, you manage the house and the kids all on your own. My gosh, you have incredible organizational skills. You have incredible priority setting. You have incredible communication skills. So, consider your whole self. Don't just think about the work related experience you have. You have life experience to bring, and you can demonstrate that without, if you're not comfortable referencing your personal life, say, you can just speak to how you would solve a situation where two colleagues were disagreeing with one another, aka your kids fighting over a toy. But you don't have to say it's your kids, right? It's the same skills. So think about your whole person when you go to apply for a job. And secondly, some wise advice that I got is, you have nothing to respond to until someone makes you an offer. So go for it. If you
Is
get an
that
offer, then you've got something to talk about.
is the I call it the non-linear aspect of a woman's career, the family, kids, right? And whether it's 6 weeks or whether it's my wife took 10 years off, which we were lucky to be able to do. Is that the big interrupter here, or is it way more complicated than that? I'm sensing it's the latter, and yet I confess I do see that non-linear thing as the real big hurdle.
I really believe it depends on the environment you're in and how evolved they are, to be honest. So for women who have a 10-year gap and they want to get back into the workforce, that's where you really need to draw on your whole person, financial management, all those kinds of skills that you have running a household, scheduling, good Lord.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. Um, I, I think that, children can be a disruption, as you say, in the sense that, you do take time. I took 6 months off with each of my kids way back in the day. I happened to be in a union environment where my position was guaranteed. A lot of women are not in that environment. A lot of
Hmm.
women, you take 6 months off, you come back, and you suddenly find you're in a lower position, or you have to start from the bottom and work your way up again. So you definitely don't you don't have the same opportunities. But also, I would say that childcare perceptions fall disproportionately on women.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about, working dads and how hard it can be for them. Um, but I think that we need to get over it. It seems like it's a very old trope. I feel like there is more equality now in a lot of households, where you can say, I have to take a meeting at 5 o'clock. Can you go, make sure you're home so that we can get the kids from daycare or whatever. We have 2 dogs. We do this with our dogs. We schedule, make sure that we're here for the dog. Um, so I feel like it is changing. It definitely was a bigger issue, I would say, in the 80s, 90s era, finally.
You mentioned that one of the issues is that public relations or the practitioners in our industry, they're not taken seriously enough to get to board level. You see a lot of compositions of board, and there tends to be a marketing person there. But do you feel that actually we're entering potentially into a bit of a golden era where, because of all the turmoil in the world, the sort of the risk to reputation, the sort of increasingly complex geopolitical and culture wars, that actually PR is as important as marketing on the board? And actually, previously, perhaps we were reduced to a bit of media outreach, a bit of events, and now actually we've got this new digital realm with data backing us, that actually we may be entering the best sort of time of the profession, if one can call it that.
Yeah, I think the pandemic bore that out. Suddenly, there were companies facing issues, reputational issues, staffing, employment conflicts where people are working from home or they're uncomfortable coming to the workplace. Those sorts of things. And I think that that's when communication PR really kind of had a golden moment to say, this is what we do, this is our jam. Unfortunately, it's like one of those situations, almost like emergency preparedness, that unless you're in the middle of a forest fire, you forget where the fire extinguisher is. And so now here we are. It's several years on, and I do feel it's sliding back again into more of a tactical role. I do feel that we have gone back to being perceived as order takers. In other words, I want you to send out this news release. It needs to go out on Tuesday. Make sure you hit these. Like, that's my job, dude. That's my job.
And it's our job to provide the proof points on it, right? To hit the KPIs.
100%.
That's the point here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really think that is where we can make huge strides, to be honest, is making sure that we have sufficient data, that we're speaking the language of business, that we are hitting on the bottom line issues that impact the C-suite. Let's stop counting things. Let's stop counting the number of news releases sent, likes on social media.
Impressions. Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about the outcomes. So a great way to think about this is, yes, maybe you've pushed something out on social, you've got 57,000 likes, big deal. From that, you've got, 30% click-through rate. Ooh, that's pretty good. But now all you've got is people on your website. Okay, cool. Let's talk about the conversion rate. How many of those people actually bought something, or engaged, or took another step, contacted the business for some reason? That's the metric we need. We need to show that what we're doing is impacting the bottom line. And we can do that. We just have to be open to thinking about it that way.
Do you think as an industry we have an aversion to data, that it's something that we sort of kind of close our eyes and don't want to sort of talk about? Because we do have a funny relationship with measurement.
We do. I think it's the causation versus correlation argument that gets us caught up. We are more concerned about demonstrating causation. So, can we categorically say that something we did caused something to happen? There's just too many influences in life. I think we need to, well, that's important. It is very important. I think we can also show correlation. If you've put something out there and suddenly foot traffic in your store increases by 50%, I think you can probably look to it and say, well, what happened? What changed for the foot traffic to increase? And if your marketing, PR, communication efforts are part of that, then you can take part of that win. We don't have to have such a direct causation line. I mean, if we could, it'd be great. But that has been our nemesis since the beginning, is that causation, because so many other parts of an organization come into play when it comes to things like a sale. There's the whole sales department, right? And they usually claim the wins. But if we didn't get the people in the door, who are you selling to? So I think we need to start to look at sort of where we are putting our efforts, what impact it's having, and then start to talk about that impact in front of the C-suite.
Sue, great to see you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, wow, that went fast.
It did.
Yeah, let's do it again.